Welcome, everybody. Yesterday, we got through the first full day. The sun came up and then it set of Donald Trump's second term. And while much of the chaos and the dysfunction of this administration might look like incompetence as we go through the next 4 years, I think it's important to understand that this is often part of a deliberate strategy. And that is how I want to start the show today. A multi-time guest on this program, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, calls this engineered incompetence, which she defines as appointing unqualified people to powerful positions because, indeed, they are unqualified, in order to weaken those institutions, in order to consolidate power, in order to prioritize loyalty over expertise. And that is exactly the strategy that Trump is employing in this second term. And that is also a hallmark, we have to admit, of authoritarian regimes. And it was also evident during Donald Trump's first term. Let's talk about the first term first, and then we'll talk about this second term. Think back. Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education. No business being in that role. And what did she do? She actively undermined public schools and protections for student borrowers. Her lack of experience wasn't a bug, it was a feature designed to weaken trust in public education by putting someone totally incompetent in charge of it, which will make it worse. We have other examples from Trump's first term. Scott Pruitt at the EPA completely dismantled environmental regulations rather than protecting the environment, which is one of the responsibilities of the person in that role. And that was completely in line with Donald Trump's agenda, which is let's prioritize industry profits over public health. The incompetence was engineered to be to Trump's advantage. William Barr at the Department of Justice as Attorney General completely reshaped the Justice Department into Donald Trump's personal legal team. And what it focused on was let's protect Trump's allies, let's target Trump's enemies, rather than simply upholding the rule of law. These are not isolated incidents. They were not isolated during Donald Trump's first term. And if we zoom out a little bit and look more historically, as Ruth Ben-Ghiat does in her article, authoritarians historically have used engineered incompetence to achieve similar goals. I'll give you some examples. Benito Mussolini in Italy sidelined and demoted officials who were capable. Air Force Minister Italo Balbo, for example, when they became too well known or too competent. Mussolini replaced Balbo with loyalists who did not pose any threat to Mussolini's authority. Putin in Russia is a great example, surrounds himself with cronies. Their primary qualification is loyalty, and they are meant to ensure that institutions like the judiciary and the media serve Putin rather than the public. We look at Turkey, for example, and Erdogan, who purged thousands of experienced civil servants after a failed coup attempt and replaced them with political loyalists. They crippled institutions. They concentrated power. It's Project 2025 to a T. And Donald Trump's second term is doubling down on this strategy. The appointments, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. Hegseth is a guy who completely lacks any experience running organizations, especially organizations as vast and complex as the Department of Defense. Yes, he has these misogynistic views of opposing women in combat, and that's going to discourage women from enlisting. It'll worsen the recruiting crisis in the military, sure. But the big picture here is that you look at Hegseth's credentials, promoting conspiracy theories, disinformation, false claims about the 2020 election, false claims about January 6th. All of it threatens the military as an institution that relies on intelligence and nonpartisanship, and instead will push it towards partisanship. And that is a mirror of other authoritarian tactics to weaken national security and centralize power. This is always dicey, but you look at Hitler. Hitler would frequently promote ideological zealots like Himmler to important positions, and the competent professionals are sidelined, and this allows them to retain control. Orbán in Hungary has eroded the judiciary and the media by replacing experts with loyalists. You get it, I think. This is the same approach of Trump, especially in this second term. Now, then we have to look at Trump's second term ambitions. And those just further illustrate the risk of this engineered incompetence. Trump wants to pull the military in to involve the military in mass deportations of migrants. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Military tribunals for political opponents like Liz Cheney, who, by the way, fortunately for her, has been pardoned by Joe Biden. Looking at claiming territories like Greenland or the Panama Canal or Canada. These are not only legally dubious ideas, but they're reckless and they're dangerous. And they only become more dangerous when you have unqualified leaders like Pete Hegseth. And then you zoom out and you see Trump's cabinet more generally. The people who are being put in place in this cabinet are not equipped to run their respective departments. They are there to serve the Trump agenda. So the bigger picture is clear. Trump isn't simply choosing people because he's bad at hiring, although he probably is. This engineered incompetence is a tool that's used to erode institutions that protect democracy and replace them with mechanisms that ensure loyalty. And so now in Trump's second term, we have to understand that the chaos and the dysfunction is part of the plan. We can't simply point to it and go, it's so chaotic, it's so dysfunctional. Yes, it is. But we're the only ones who care about that. It's part of the strategy for MAGA. Education, environmental protection, national defense. The point is weaken the institutions and centralize power around Trump. We're looking at it through the American lens because we're here in the United States. But this is a playbook used by autocrats around the world and over time. To protect democracy, we have to expose the strategy for what it is. It's not just Hegseth's bad because he's incompetent. It's the whole idea is to put people who are too incompetent, they know they're in over their heads. And so what do? They go, I'll do whatever Trump wants me to do. So we have to stay vigilant. We have to hold the strategy accountable for what it is. And then we have to do whatever we can to ensure that the damage caused isn't permanent, because we've seen where this road leads in other countries. Now let's talk about the immigration aspect.